Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Association for Fixed Annuities webcast. I'm Chuck DiVincenzo, President and CEO at NAFA, and this is our 14th webinar in our series presented during this COVID-19 crisis. This hopes to bring you timely information to membership and the industry, obviously as these unprecedented times transform how we continue to successfully modify our business models. And today, obviously, will be very apropos of that, as we are pleased to have two premier partners, CANNEX and Pacific Life, joining us on a discussion of how COVID is changing the future of fixed annuity products. Moderating our panel today is Tamiko Tolan of CANNEX. Tamiko is head of annuity research for Toronto-based CANNEX. Her focus is the individual and institutional U.S. annuity market. CANNEX has long been known as the leading provider of income annuity pricing and now serves the entire scope of annuity products, including the evaluation of annuities with income guarantees. Tamiko is a thought leader with more than 15 years of experience tracking trends and key issues on retirement income, synthesizing commentary and analysis for broad audience and specific clients. I'm pleased in terms of my own interaction with Tamiko as a very thoughtful and exceedingly knowledgeable presenter and researcher. She's known for her dynamic presentations with a unique perspective on the industry and the forces that are shaping it. Our panel includes Amanda Dundas, a business analyst at CANNEX specializing in financial software for quoting and pricing of annuity products. She actively communicates with insurance carriers to facilitate the maintenance of single premium immediate annuities and deferred income annuity products on CANNEX's income annuity service. She also works on advancing CANNEX's software offerings to meet current industry demands, whether regulatory or trend-driven, using her previous experience at various financial software companies. Joining her from CANNEX is Jamie Branyan, who manages annuity product and operations for the CANNEX U.S. annuity platforms, which includes fixed indexed, and VAs. He also manages CANNEX's relationship with insurance companies that publish their annuity data on the various services. He has over 19 years of experience at large insurance carriers developing, managing, and launching annuity products. Joining the CANNEX team from Pacific Life is Steve Goldberg, who's Assistant Vice President of Product Management, Annuities Retirement Solutions Division. As an AVP at Pacific Life, Steve's responsible for driving strategic positioning and developing awareness and education of Pac Life's fixed and variable annuities, including leadership of product marketing, sales training, competition analysis, and hypothetical annuity illustration tools. Prior to his role, Steve was Director of Product Development at Pac Life. Thank you all for joining our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Chuck. And thank you so much for inviting us to participate in this webinar. It's great to be able to reach a broader audience and, especially in a different medium. For our part, we've been fielding a lot of questions about the nature of changes to fixed annuities during this unprecedented time. So, there are a lot of factors that make this really fundamentally different from the financial crisis of 2008, notably the fact that the economic factors didn't cause this crisis in the first place. But all the same, it's had a profound effect on people all over the world, obviously. And the onset was both extremely rapid and severe, much more so than we saw in 2008. So the drop in interest rates and the equity crash both naturally affect the management of fixed annuities to varying degrees. So I want to stress the point that these environmental changes affect all companies issuing annuities, but that anyone would reasonably expect the responses to vary according to practices, assumptions, and expectations endemic to each company. I'm so happy that we're fortunate enough to have Steve Goldberg here from Pac Life. He'll be able to drill down to that perspective, but I just want to point out that, anything that Pac Life says, it's neither an endorsement nor a condemnation of how other companies have responded. I'm sure he'll say something similar, but, we do expect some variation in how companies respond, and I think we'll see that as we get into it. But the idea here, and the reason I have some of my colleagues from CANNEX with us today, is that we're going to provide sort of a high-level overview of the changes that we've seen at CANNEX through our services, and then we're going to follow up with Steve to get some insight from one carrier's home office and how they've been dealing with this crisis. So I'm going to start with Jamie. Now, Jamie, give me a timeline of when we started seeing an increase in the pace of changes. And just, I actually, I don't remember where we're at with this, but so Jamie, also talk about those specific products that you're going to cover.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, I guess, almost everyone. And good morning to our West Coast listeners. So I'm going to primarily try to focus on fixed and index products. I think that's probably the appropriate products to talk about for this audience. We really started seeing changes hitting, I'll say around March 13th, that Friday. From March, I'll give you an example. So from March 13th to March 20th, we saw 12 companies change their FIA rates. And from the following week, the 23rd through the 30th, we saw 13 companies change their FIA rates. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, Jamie, that doesn't mean anything to me because I don't know what's normal. Well, if you look, the week before, we had six companies change their rates. And if you just look at the month before, so the same week of the month, but back in February, we had 4 companies. If you look at the same week of the month back in January, we had 4 companies. Because, sometimes rate changes can be cyclical. But I think so. My point of that is to say that we really started seeing, 3 times the amount of changes that we would normally see during that period. And over the course of 2 weeks, we saw 25 changes. It was coming fast and it was coming furious as far as just what I think companies could change first, which were the crediting rates. We've also seen FIA, FIA product closures, FRA product closures. And when I say FRA, we're saying fixed rate annuities. And we've also seen, changes to income riders and closures there too.
Great, Jamie. Can you give me an idea about, say, are these suspensions temporary, or are some of them permanent? And then, what kind of variations do you see as far as companies and how they may be treating different types of products or products with different features?
Yeah, we've seen, it's interesting. We've seen a lot of different approaches taken by both insurance companies and distributors in response to this. I think that some of the changes, the reasons that we're seeing for these responses, I think are probably determined by, the diversity of their current product offering, so the better mix that they have between fixed index and variable and income products, then the more diverse that is, then the more options they have and changes to make and which products that they can use to make those changes. I also think it varies by the amount of business that they already have on the books and the risk profile of those products and the filing strategy that they've used with these products can also impact what changes they can make quickly and what changes they may have to refile. So a lot of the speed and impact here is, I think, based on those. But if you look at the indexed annuities to start off with, we've seen a ton of rate decreases. We've seen product closures, and we've also seen product suspensions. To your point in your question, it's interesting to see that some products and riders and even features have been categorized as a suspension. I assume that means that the insurance carriers are looking to remain on the shelf of the distributors so that when the product can be more competitive again, when the market allows it, that it can more quickly be turned right back on for sales. We've seen an interesting progression too at some of the carriers during mid to late March. There was one carrier in particular that said, okay, we're shutting down 1 or 2 products. We're like, okay. And then the next day we got an email saying, okay, not only those 2 products, but we're going to shut down this living benefit. All right. And then a couple days later, all right, we're going to shut down all the living benefits. And it's just interesting to see that progression, and you can almost imagine, the meetings and the discussions that are taking place at the carriers trying to figure out how to respond and what is the best response both for the company, for the employees, and for their customers. We even saw one company who just shut down all their fixed products, which included their SPIA. And it's been interesting from an index perspective. For fixed annuities, it's very similar, right? We've seen products closing, we've seen credit rates drop. Some are even down all the way at their minimum. We've seen deposit bands close. So if a product has a low band and a high band, which offer different rates, we've seen a lot of the lower bands close and keeping the higher bands open. We've seen guarantee periods close. So you have MIGAs that have maybe two, three, or four, or five different crediting options, and a lot of those get closed down, and they've gone down to 2. We've been told when you talk about the competitiveness of the rates, we've even been told by some distributors, look, this company's product is no longer, the rates are not where we want them to be. So we want you to remove the product from your platform because we no longer want to promote the product. When the rates do come back, we'll let you know and we'll turn it right back on. So we've seen a lot from the fixed products, and I've been talking for a long time, but let me just do one last section for the income riders. We've seen a few approaches on income riders or living benefits. We've seen suspension of sales for the income riders, which I think gives them a quick change to market and a quick recovery. We've seen some that have been permanently closed. We've also seen some riders where the rates have been lowered to the point where, my words, not theirs, they're really uncompetitive. So instead of closing the rider, the rates are just lowered to a point where it seems like, the carrier is trying to artificially stop sales from happening and almost daring somebody to try and sell them. So the rider is still available, but won't be sold. And then again, when the market dictates that it's financially viable, the insurance company can raise the rates and the product can be sold once again.
That's really fascinating, and it makes me wonder about the opportunity this creates for companies that might be interested in picking up some market share if they're comfortable on the management side. So have you seen any of them increasing rates or making the products richer since the end of March?
So we've seen products working their way back to being competitive. We've seen crediting rates going back up, but maybe not where they once were pre-March. And we've seen income rider rates going up on certain products. But interestingly, we've also seen them continue to decrease on other products. So this is kind of what I was saying. I think that depending on the block of business and the different levers that the insurance company has to be able to pull, is determining where they're putting the stake in the ground to be competitive versus which products they are pulling back on to try and tamp down during this time. We've also seen products where I said earlier, a distributor came to us and said, we want this product shut down. And then a few weeks later, I think it was like 3.5 weeks later, they came back and said, okay, the product is back. We're ready to sell it. And I don't know if that's necessarily based on the product coming back or the competition coming down to it. We've also seen new products launched. And I'm sure that, Steve will be able to address this better than me, but we've seen companies launching new products, and you wonder if it's a coincidence in timing of these projects have already been in the hopper for a while, and then versus some that maybe needed to be put on the fast track in order to get out, to give the sales force a positive story, or at least a new story to tell, as well as having the opportunity to get something else out there that can bring in a different type of mix and risk to their portfolio.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And, I think that what we're seeing does have a lot to do with those variations in product management and just, composition of your business and the things that make the carriers really different from each other. So it seems like in times like this, these factors become more exposed than ever. So Amanda, I'd like to switch gears. Thank you so much, Jamie, by the way. Thank you. And Amanda, I'd like to switch gears and get your perspective on income annuities. That includes both the SPIAs and the DIAs. Can you just start with a timeline of changes?
Hi, thank you, Tomoko. So I can definitely start with the timeline of changes, but before I do, I just should probably explain something that Jamie touched on. So I just want to explain that carriers with income annuities on CANNEX do have full control of their product interest rates, and they can modify them at any time. So what this means is similar to what Jamie did, we can observe the frequency of the rate updates, and we can also observe the resulting price fluctuations that took place sort of over the course of this pandemic. So I should also say that about half of the CANNEX participating carriers typically adhere to a somewhat loose rate updating schedule of either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, while the other half choose to update their SPIA and DIA rates on an as-needed or an ad hoc basis. So I just quickly want to walk through the trends in updating for SPIA and DIA products that we saw in CANNEX. So it was very evident that insurance carriers began to deviate from their normal patterns of updating, and they started to increase their frequency beginning in March. So for example, carriers that only updated, say, every 1 to 2 months saw an increase of up to 2 to 3 updates in the month of March alone. So that increased frequency even continued into April, with the month of March seeing 40% of our carriers increase their frequency, and then the month of April seeing about 18% either continue to deviate or begin to deviate from the norm. So March 9th and March 16th, those 2 weeks were probably the hardest hitting weeks in terms of the total volume of rate updates across all the participating carriers, specifically for this product line. So what I've done here is I've created a graph, and I chose to map out one scenario, which is a single life with a 10-year guarantee and a 1-month income deferral. And then I chose to kind of map out the associated monthly income, and I randomly selected 6 carriers just to represent what's happening for all of our products on CANNEX. So you can see that the monthly income payment amount is quoted on a weekly basis over March, April, and May. And it also includes this week's figures as well. And then the dotted line section at the beginning is just to provide further context and shows the monthly price point in early January and February. So as you can kind of see, there was a very slight decrease of rates that started happening in the month of February, and this moved into a sharp decline in the week of March 16th. And for SPIA, it kind of hit lows for the most part in the week of March 23rd. So you can see at least 3 carriers spike downwards. And then for some reason on March 30th, half of the carriers had another spike upwards. So I think that this is probably following the markets here, but it's interesting to see it all laid out. And I guess as it continues into April and May, you can see the prices begin to follow their own path, or maybe internal company strategies, with some ending up just under where they were in January. And one is the green one here is actually higher than it was in January. So that was specifically for SPIA pricing. So I also mapped it out for DIA pricing, which is my next graph. And for DIA pricing, I did the same type of analysis. However, I chose a different group of carriers. So these are carriers that offer this product on our service. And I selected a similar quote scenario. However, the income deferral instead of 1 month is 5 years in this scenario. I also added in a December data point that kind of gives us further context, because if you just see it from January and February, the drop looks more dramatic. Once you add in December, it kind of seems a little bit more reasonable. But I think it's fairly evident here that it drops more in January and February and continues to drop through March. So I know that with DIA, it's always like the scale of the fluctuations is always going to seem more dramatic due to the deferral, but you can also see that rates reached their lowest point probably March 23rd, March 30th, or March 16th, around there. And then again, you can see them picking back up, similar to SPIA, and they've either stayed relatively flat through May, or they're starting to climb back to this middle ground. Most haven't returned to the same highs that they saw in December and January, with the exception of maybe the orange carrier, who's somewhat higher than they were in December and January.
This is really fascinating. Again, we see a diversity of responses, although apparently less so with DIA than with SPIA. Can you tell me what other types of changes that you're seeing besides pricing, suspensions and what have you as well?
Yeah, definitely. So as Jamie said earlier, we have seen some suspensions. For SPIA and DIA, there was actually only one carrier who has temporarily suspended their product, which happened around the end of March. And I don't believe that the carrier has turned the product back on yet. So it's still suspended as of today. And then other than that, I'm seeing more regulatory changes for the moment that are pertaining to Secure Act and Reg BI. And I think that the reason why I haven't seen any other huge changes is because carriers are mostly controlling this product through their rate updating. So they're able to submit their rate updates and adjust to the market as quickly or as often as they need to. But yeah, I think it was more interesting to map out and show kind of this visual sampling of the rate fluctuations during the period of COVID-19.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for putting that together. So Steve, I'd love to hear more about Pac Life and how things have been progressing for you guys from the early days of the pandemic till now.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Tamiko, and thank you to everyone for joining the call. Yeah, it's interesting, how you phrased that question, the early days of the pandemic. I was doing some research for the webinar, and, I realized it's only been 68 business days since the S&P 500 hit its all-time high on February 19th. And so if we call that date the start of the pandemic, at least from an economic standpoint, just think about how much has taken place in such a short amount of time. And it is just hard to believe how much has taken place for all of us on so many different levels. Excuse me, as we look at our families, our family dynamics, those of us who have young kids and teenagers, those of us with aging parents, we look at our health, both mental and physical, how we're educating our kids, and then look at the economics that have gone into this, from the markets to the job losses, and how those economics have been interpreted by the markets in terms of equity levels, equity volatility, and interest rates, which have been about as volatile as I've certainly ever seen them. From Pacific Life's perspective, we, along with I'm sure everyone else listening to this call, we had to make assessments and decisions and move very quickly. And so I think the first thing that hit our radar once we started understanding the guidance from the various government entities, and as we were hearing that the schools were going to move to distance learning, was how we were going to take a staff in the mid 3,000 level that mostly worked in office buildings every day, many for years and years and years, in California, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Virginia, and transition that 3,000 plus workforce to a work from home environment. So many exercises taking place to stress test our technology and, very importantly, our cybersecurity. And so we did tests where we had 20% of our staff working from home one day. Then the next test, a few days later, we had half of our staff working from home. And beginning on March 17th, about 95% of our entire company began working from home. So the safety and the health of our employees and families have always been first and foremost. But right alongside of that, we had to make sure we could continue to service our clients, both financial professionals and contract owners, during this especially demanding time. And then again, the economics were hitting us front and center on both fixed and variable annuities due to these record low interest rates and record high equity volatility. So we had to quickly make difficult decisions to, as Jamie and Amanda mentioned, we immediately lowered fixed annuity interest rates, including FIA caps and participation rates. And then we started to assess the closure of certain fixed annuity products and income riders, which we did execute on May 1st. We closed a MIGA product and a book value fixed annuity, and we closed our living benefit withdrawal benefit riders on our fixed index annuities. And then we moved to make adjustments on our variable annuities as well, and we reduced rider features and raised costs there, and those were executed May 1st as well.
Wow. So, yeah, I guess that's very much in line with what we heard from Jamie and Amanda. Now, some manufacturers have sped up product launches that were already planned with an eye to diversifying their annuity offerings. So how has the pandemic changed PacLife's perspective on product launches that were already in the chute?
Yeah, so I think, Jamie said it well. I think a lot of it depends on where each company sits in terms of how its portfolio is diversified and, many other things. And we walked into the crisis, I think, in very good shape, very well capitalized. We recently sold at the end of last year our aviation capital group, which is an aircraft leasing division, which provided additional capital. So again, our experience could be very different from many others. And really, the crisis has not changed, any of our perspective on product launch strategy. The annuities that we file with the states and whatnot, and the riders that we file, they typically have built-in flexibility to allow us to make tweaks based on economics as economics move through the approval process and whatnot. Our product launch calendar is typically put in place 12 to 24 months in advance. And so again, while we may tweak some of the features based on economics, it's really business as usual with any new fixed and variable annuity products and riders that we want to introduce to the market as we move forward. And so we may iterate a bit on some product features, but we do continue to execute according to our strategy, which we have a strategy in place we call Horizon 2025.
Wow. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much goes into getting a product on the shelf. It's not like you can take a week or two working from your home office and, suddenly launch something new. I think that some companies have been in a position where they had products that were like very appropriate for diversifying, and great for them. But tell me, looking towards the future, and given the fact that, there has to be some kind of, runway in order to launch something, give us some insight about how this situation is going to or might influence future product innovation.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a really difficult question to answer. The question you're posing is about innovation. I think that a lot of what we do from an industry perspective, and clearly including ourselves, it can be innovative, but many times it's reaction and iteration due to economics, like we just walked through. To really truly be innovative, you have to have a true understanding of the situation and the problems you're trying to solve. And so, I really think that, clearly from Pacific Life's perspective, we need to really better understand how this situation is truly going to affect, both financial professional and consumer needs and preferences. And I would imagine we're still very early in this. These needs and preferences may shift depending on how the crisis shifts as well as we move forward. To a large degree, I think the answer may depend on when clients and financial professionals truly feel comfortable working together face to face as we move forward. So far, much of the feedback we've heard is that it's more difficult for financial professionals to get in front of their clients right now, and understandably so. So I suppose the question is, does that continue, or do we eventually settle into a new normal where people feel more comfortable meeting in a virtual and remote capacity? And so, innovation may come on the product side, but where we may see more significant innovation is really maybe related to how we service our clients, how we educate our clients, and how we market to our clients. Again, I want to, clients from our standpoint is going to mean both financial professionals and consumers. The other piece of this is the economics, and we feel strongly that while, these income payouts and interest earning opportunities have been reduced over the last few months, that the value proposition for annuities is still clearly in place. I'm not sure if you've seen, I'm sure many of you have, but Wade Pfau recently said that as of mid-March, the 4% rule for clients that take a moderate amount of risk should really be more like the 2.4% rule. And so if you think about a 65-year-old male who's looking for income, and I took this right from the CANNEX SPIA portal, he can receive about $5,400 annually right now using a life with cash refund SPIA. Of course, that's a 5.4% payout, again, compared to the 2.4% rule. It could be as much as $6,000 or a 6% payout if we just did life only. So we think the value proposition is clearly still there, and in fact, it may even be stronger during times of low interest rates, because mortality pooling becomes more valuable. It's a more valuable piece of the income equation when interest rates are low. And so it may be that, clients need to go through a shift, a reset of their expectations downward a bit, unfortunately, and truly understand, what can insurance products deliver? And again, like always, what are the alternatives? Whether they be money markets, CDs, bonds, bond funds, so forth. And we may need to look at more straightforward solutions to, deliver these solutions again for the at least the short term, virtually and remotely. The good news is that corporate bond yields, while they are lower, they have not decreased by as much as treasuries, which, treasuries are down to 70 bips in the 10-year treasury. And of course, insurance companies, we primarily purchase corporate bonds for our general accounts that support fixed annuities. However, what's, really contributing to some of the lower rates and whatnot on FIAs is the cost of options. Those are still very expensive. And so it makes it difficult to provide interest earning opportunities where, as high as we were in the past. And so again, innovation may come in the form of better communicating the value proposition of annuities. And here I'd like to actually give NAFA a shout out and the Alliance for Lifetime Income for the great work that they have done on educating the public on the solutions that we offer that do meet client needs of safe accumulation and protected lifetime income.
Steve, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree with you more on the points about the value of these products, despite this really challenging condition, because it's not like interest rates are only low for one firm. I mean, they're low for everybody. And the point that you made about mortality risk pooling is really fantastic, that, it becomes that much more significant. So, we're taking up a lot of folks' time with all this. It's been a fantastic discussion. And I want to thank everybody. We represent both coasts of the U.S. CANNEX is the Toronto-based company, but Jamie and I are both in the U.S. and Amanda's actually in Toronto. So despite the fact that the border's closed, we're all still gathering here together and, appreciate that opportunity to keep all of our flags flying. So, I don't know if we have time, Chuck, or do we have time for any questions?
Sure. I mean, we definitely have time for a question or kind of an engagement.
Yeah.
I think Go ahead, Kim.
No. I was just going to say, shoot.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, like, as you guys have seen the dynamic of these changes in March, and then obviously seems like things smoothing out a fair amount, although subject to radical change at any point in time. Have you guys seen when you're discussing with different carriers variations in product mix and what have you that are significant, and what are you seeing?
Is that for me? Is that for CANNEX?
Yeah, that would be for you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we have, we do sell variable annuities and fixed annuities, kind of a full suite of products in both categories. And, 2018 and 19, we clearly did more fixed annuity business than variable. The variable sales have come down a bit since, call it March 1st, but not by a lot. Variable sales have actually held up pretty well. The fixed annuity sales, traditional fixed, book value and MBA, and fixed index annuities have come down more significantly for sure. We have raised our interest rates, and I think we did make a rate increase on April 1st. And so, a lot of times these things take some time. We made pretty severe cuts March 1st, raised on April 1st, so on and so forth. So, the fixed annuity sales clearly feel like they've bottomed, and, we're hopeful that we'll start to see them moderate up, but they did decline, clearly further than the variable annuities did. So right now we're selling more variable annuity than we're selling fixed annuity.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. I guess another question for
I have a follow-up question for him on that, though. So do you see a change in the balance of variable annuity with and without living benefit in that mix?
Well, we sell a kind of a unique variable annuity. Well, it's funny. It didn't used to be unique. It's a guaranteed minimum accumulation benefit, and basically we launched it last fall. But since and the timing is kind of right because we just don't know where the equity markets are going to go. They could go up 50%. They could go down 50%. So this is a benefit that allows you to invest in a variable annuity. You get a high amount of equity exposure if that's what you're looking for, up to 80% equities, but you can never lose more than 10% of your contract value over a 5-year term. So that has performed very well, a variable annuity with rider. The others have come down, the income benefits, because we did reduce income benefits. We reduced the features, and then the variable annuities without a rider has come down, but that accumulation benefit has actually risen, and to kind of offset some of that.
Great, thanks. Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I guess for Jamie, I guess as you're looking at developing strategy, hearing the carriers develop strategies for the future, where are you seeing the most dynamic changes in product in terms of as they're reaching out, and what do you think over the next 12 months?
What we've been seeing a lot of what I think is can be called the variable index product. There seems to be a few years ago, Jackson National hit big with their investment only VA, right? And that kind of became the carrot that a lot of carriers tried to chase and replicate that success, and mostly, kind of unsuccessfully. And then AXA came out with, with that, I think it was kind of called like a buffered annuity, or the variable index. And since then, I think that's been the new wave that people are writing. We've been seeing a lot of new versions of that coming out. changes to those products being made, innovations in how, how carriers are crediting performance in those products. We haven't seen a lot of what I would consider, groundbreaking innovation on the variable side, but I do think that you've got a lot of creative people at the insurance companies chomping at the bit on what they can do with some of these variable index products.
That's a really good answer. I appreciate that. That's trying to get arms around that. Really interesting for going forward, particularly in this mindset that folks will be in a kind of a fear mindset in a sense over the next, likely for the next at least 12 to 18 months. What are you seeing in terms of any income riders or whatever that may, are you seeing any movement back towards that as things stabilize a little bit, hopefully?
Yeah, from our perspective, we've been seeing, we've been asked by some carriers to add some new income riders that they've been coming out with. We have seen movements in the withdrawal rates, the roll-up rates, all the things that people really care about. And I did want to say one thing really quick. People on here, when you hear CANNEX, some of you may be thinking, I thought CANNEX was a SPIA company. And while that's true, that has been the foundation of the company, we also do have a fixed annuity rate platform, an indexed annuity rate platform, and an indexed and variable annuity income analysis tool. So that's one of the reasons why we've been brought on to kind of address a wide variety of products, is because we do have platforms that deal with all of these, even though our bread and butter is kind of in SPIA. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there while we were talking about different product types.
Hey, you have a bunch of sales folks listening, so we always like to hear that. So back to you, Tamiko.
Oh no, I thought that was great, Jamie. We need to talk about your acronyms, but we'll handle that offline.
I know.
All right. And I will bring it up though, because it is super confusing as we talk about some of these products, particularly the registered index-linked annuities. That's the RILA acronym, and that is a kind of industry-approved, compliant with various different carriers, requirements on discussing these products, aka buffered, aka variable index annuities, and it is a very robust area of development. We've already seen quite a bit of innovation. I expect to see only more of the same, and it's a very complementary product in a lot of ways, just because of the way that it works, and because it's on a variable platform. Even if it's not technically a variable annuity, the way that they're structured, because you can tolerate some or you can design them to potentially have losses, as opposed to an FIA, that it gives you more flexibility in terms of design. But I think that that's a very important differentiator, and one of the reasons that people have always really liked the FIAs, because the story is extremely simple. You don't lose money, and there's a floor. When the floor can be in the negatives, that's different. It's just a different value proposition. So I just think that we'll continue to see variations on a theme, as well as particularly on the FIA front, but definitely also with RILA, that more in different indices and ways of understanding how an index might perform within a certain market environment, because we're certainly getting a little bit more diversity on that than we've seen in the last decade. So, I think that's something that people have to be thinking about more actively. So back to you, Chuck.
Thank you, Tamiko. Really appreciate it. I'd like to really thank Amanda, Jamie, and Steve. Great information today. Really appreciate you all. And then in particular, Tamiko, for helping put together the panel and being able to present today. The information was both informative and enlightening. and I really appreciate the dialogue amongst all of you. This webinar was recorded and will be available for those who could not attend today and wanting to review the content we can on our website. Our next webcast is scheduled for Thursday, May 28th, when our guests from AIG join us for an in-depth look at elder financial abuse during the COVID-19 pandemic and how to protect your clients and potential clients from financial harm. If you're not an AFA member and would like to support our education and advocacy initiatives in support of the annuity industry, as well as obtain information from our previous presentations, just go to NAFA.com, click on membership, and join NAFA. Once again, Tamiko, Amanda, Jamie, and Steve, thanks for joining us and the teams at CANNEX and Pac Life for the information shared today. Thank you all for your time and attendance, and this concludes our webcast. Have a great Memorial Day.